Assalamu alaikum. Today, this is a longer than usual segment because we have to cover multiple scenes at once. We have to do this in order to explain all the different facts related to each other in one single segment. So this is a longer segment, but inshallah, tomorrow we're going to skip. So because this is a longer segment, I'm going to give you a break tomorrow because you're going to spend a lot more time reviewing the segment, really analyzing the details, preparing questions, and inshallah when we return with segment number 25, we're going to deal with some analysis of the information in this segment. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. This is segment number 24. We are going to cover about 7 different ayat from 2 different parts in the story. We're still in Surah Yussuf, which is a long series of about 30 different segments. So inshallah, in this segment specifically, we're going to answer this question: exactly how did the gossiping women cut off their hands? I told you that's not the right interpretation or translation, but we're going to see exactly what that means. And then we're going to understand specifically from a point of view of methodology how a scene can be understood only after understanding another much later scene. And this is a major lesson related to this methodology. We have to be patient, we have to be diligent, we have to be persistent. We look forward to ayat that come much later in order to understand something that preceded them. And this is the style of the Quran, especially in this surah, as we have said many times before. Again, this is a presentation that is at the level of a graduate school course. Please take it seriously. There's a lot of material. Please keep taking notes. Keep recording your questions. Follow up with the evidence that we provide. And understand that it's a very sophisticated story. Much more adult, much more complex in nature than the simplistic story they gave us, the Disney-like story they gave us in the books of tafsir, unfortunately. So in this segment, we're going to cover first ayah 50 to 53. Ayah 50 to 53, that's much later. Yes, I know. We have to understand that scene before we come back to the scene where the gossiping women did their thing and supposedly they were invited to a feast and all of that stuff, and you'll see that has nothing to do with what they told us. It was all fake, imaginary stuff that they confabulated out of thin air. And then we're going to close with some closing remarks that are significant in terms of the principle they provide us to understand the whole Quran. Inshallah, I hope you stay with us all the way to the end. Please write in the comments your reception to these topics. If you have some questions, start putting them down. And I assure you, we will respond to all of them, inshallah, before the series is completed. So before we start with ayah 1250, I want to share with you one small example to kind of frame things in your mind. Imagine you're solving one of these jigsaw puzzles that are, 1,000 pieces or 5,000 pieces or whatever number of pieces. Sometimes as you're trying to resolve the whole puzzle, you find a cluster of pieces that fit together quite nicely, but you don't know where they fit in the bigger puzzle. And sometimes you have more than one such clusters. Today, we're going to deal with 2 of these clusters. So we still have not seen the full picture yet. Most of it is already built in front of our eyes, but we're still putting together the final few pieces or the final few clusters. So today we have 2 different clusters. We're going to bring them together and assemble them, and you're going to see now we end up with a bigger cluster, part of the whole puzzle. And I hope this makes sense. So this is what we're doing today. This is part of the methodology. Again, I told you, this is an advanced course. It is not a course for elementary students. It's not a course for the lazy or people who think the Quran is very simple to read. You can read it while not reflecting or thinking or trying to understand the depth of it. This is a very significant part of the methodology. And I hope you are diligent enough, you are patient enough to really take it in and keep thinking and reflecting to allow it to change you in the process. As I keep saying, Surah Yussuf is an event. If you undergo this event, you come out on the other end much more prepared to deal with the rest of the Quran, inshallah. We will come back to this specific issue in the closing remarks, inshallah. So we start with ayah number 1250. So in this ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, the king is described by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وقال الملك ائتوني به فلما جاءه الرسول قال ارجع إلى ربك فاسأله ما بال النسوة اللاتي قطعن أيديهن إن ربي بكيدهن عليم. We have seen this before in the prior segment. I'm going to set up the scene and we're going to dive into it. Remember, Yusuf was in prison and he stayed in prison even after two of his prison mates were brought out of prison. One of them was freed up because it turned out that he was innocent. This person, the innocent one, the ex-prison mate, became a Muslim, as we will see later. This person happened to be in front of the king when the king asked his advisors and the notables around him to explain a report he had that we will see again later about the cows, etc. This person asked that he would be sent to talk to Yusuf about the interpretation of that report. He came to Yusuf. Yusuf provided the interpretation. That man returned to the king, and then the king asked him to go back to Yusuf and bring Yusuf to him. So this is exactly where this ayah starts. When this man came to Yusuf with the message that the king is requesting him. So the king said, bring him to me. Thereafter, when the king messenger arrived at Yusuf's prison location, Yusuf said, return to your Lord and ask him to inquire about the women who cut off their hands. Surely my Lord is knowledgeable about their collective feminine conspiracy. We saw this a little bit last segment, and we're going to revisit it again in this segment and in other segments. But for now, I want you to focus on something really critical. The king is asking for Yusuf. Yusuf is saying, no, I'm not going to come out until the king investigates something really critical. What is that critical thing that Yusuf is requesting the king to investigate? He's asking him to investigate the women, the gossiping women, basically, as we will see, who, quote unquote, cut off their hands. And I told you, cut off their hands is not the right translation. In this segment, we're going to dive more into it and explain it fully, and you're going to see for yourself exactly what it means. So inshallah, we need to remember first that Yusuf knew how to find them. So when he told the messenger of the king, return to the king and ask the king to investigate such and such women, Yusuf knew exactly where these women lived. Pay attention. That means these women did not come to the palace, but rather Yusuf went out to their location. Yusuf knew exactly where they lived or how to find them, their exact location. And we're going to see their exact location in the city or in Al-Madinah. This is the first clue that we get from this ayah. And second, as we said, Inna Rabbi bikaydihinna alim was a marking that we saw in the last segment number 23, where we said that this proved that the one who carried out the investigation after the affair in the women's chamber was the king himself. So this is the first ayah. We move to the second ayah number 51. قال ما خطبكن إذ راوتن يوسف عن نفسه قلنا حاشا لله ما علمنا عليه من سوء قالت امرأة العزيز الآن حصحص الحق أنا راودته عن نفسه وإنه لمن الصادقين. He, the king, interrogated the gossiping women just as Yusuf requested. He said, what caused you to behave how you behaved? ما خطبكن, when you attempted to compel Yusuf. إذ راوتن يوسف عن نفسه قلنا حاشا لله. They responded, they said about Yusuf, he took the side of Allah. I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail, just be patient. He took the side toward Allah. He moved toward Allah. ما علمنا عليه من سوء. We have no evidence of him committing any harm, any wrongdoing, so to speak. We further attest, pay attention, this is still their speech. قالت امرأة العزيز. They're saying that the reverend one's subordinate woman, this is the woman with the chamber, remember, and this is the woman that was instructed very early in the surah. In ayah 21, she was instructed by her master and the one who bought Yusuf. She was instructed to assign Yusuf to an honorable position, if you remember. So that was ayah 21, and we've seen this before. This is the same woman, Imra'at al-Aziz. They're referring to her as Imra'at al-Aziz. Why? Because they're speaking to the king. So this is the title that his population used to address him. So when they're addressing him, they're saying the employee of Al-Aziz, the Imra'at Al-Aziz, the woman who is subordinate to Al-Aziz. I hope this makes sense. So they're describing her as Imra'at Al-Aziz, but this is their testimony about what she said. We're going to see exactly where she said exactly the same things to them, and we're going to see this. So here they're making the testimony. Imra'at Al-Aziz is not in the picture. She's not there. The women themselves, the gossiping women who were brought to testify regarding what Yusuf recommended to the king to ask them about, these gossiping women came and said, Imra'at Al-Aziz said, meaning they are testifying, we heard her say. So that's why in our translation we say, we further attest, meaning these women are saying, we further attest that the reverend one's subordinate woman, she said, and we all witnessed it, now the truth is exposed, I attempted to compel him, to extract secrets from him, and indeed he is among the truthful. Therefore, now they're testifying on behalf of Yusuf that he did not do anything wrong, and they're bringing the testimony, collective testimony, against Imra'at Al-Aziz, against the woman of the chamber, that she is the one who tried to compel him. Now, this is very beautiful because Yusuf by himself, remember we said this in segment number 23, the prior segment, by himself, had Yusuf said she tried to compel me to disclose the secrets, it would have been his opinion or his individual claim, and that would not stand a lot of legal weight. But now all of these women combined, we don't know their count by the way, we're going to see that there's many of them. All of them combined are saying collectively, we all heard her say she tried to compel Yusuf to disclose the secrets and he did not do anything wrong. Indeed, she said about Yusuf that he was truthful. So later on we will see when he was thrown in prison, it was perhaps nobody believed him. He tried to say the right thing, but nobody believed him. We will see this much later, inshallah. But for now, we get the impression of what's going on. So first, Yusuf would not come out of prison until the king investigated these women. We're going to see again, we're going to analyze why did Yusuf do this. But for now, we're just understanding the scene. We're understanding the event so we can keep track of everything and arrange all of these facts in our mind in the proper sequence. So the king brought these gossiping women and questioned them. What was wrong with you? What caused you to behave the way you behaved when you attempted to compel Yusuf, etc., etc. So a couple of notes in here. First, notice that the king did not ask them about cutting off their hands. Here in the prior ayah, Yusuf described them as allati qatta'na aydiyahun. These women have cut off their hands. Well, if this was a physical issue, a physical cutting, the king should have asked them about this in his interrogation. But he did not. Instead, what did he ask them about? He asked them about how they compelled Yusuf or tried to compel Yusuf. And therefore, we understand that when the messenger got the information from Yusuf and returned to the king, there was more information given to that messenger that was relayed outside this ayat to the king. And here we understand that sometimes we have to fill in the blanks a little bit, sort of read in between the lines and understand that there is more information being passed than what the Quran is telling us. And the proof is right there in front of you. Yusuf says, ask these women who cut off their hands or interrogate them. And the king did not ask them about cutting off their hands. The king asked them, why did they compel Yusuf? The second note is the reverend one's subordinate woman was not with them during the interrogation. And that tells you that she was already a suspect. We will see later why we believe the king understood she is a suspect. So therefore, he is asking someone else about her. And he's trying to get the testimony of someone else against her. And then finally, the expression, Hasha lillah, qulna Hasha lillah. This is something the gossiping women said about Yusuf. And we're going to see they said it much earlier. We're going to come back. Remember, this is ayah 51. We're going to return to ayah 30 later in this segment. But we're trying to understand something that happened later in order to understand something that happened earlier. I hope that makes sense. So the verb hasha lillah is from the gerund or the root hasha, hasha. And those who speak Arabic understand that we use the word hashia, which means the margin of the page. So if you're looking at this page right here in front of me, this part right here on the right hand side where the cursor is, this is called hashia, the margin, which is the side. So hasha is the verb to take to the margin, meaning to sidestep or to take to the side or to move aside or to avoid something. So the gossiping women are explaining to the king that Yusuf avoided the issue and moved around the request that was given to him, which was to compel him to disclose the secrets. He sidestepped the whole issue and moved away from the direct answer, from providing the secrets, so to speak. So this is the meaning, hasha lillah. That means turn down our request by moving sideways, by sidestepping the issue altogether. This is something we're going to see again when we discuss ayah 30 and 31 a little later in this segment. But here they're using the exact same verb, which tells us this is the same group of women. So later on, we're going to see these are only the gossiping women, not including Imra'at al-Aziz, the reverent ones, subordinate women. This is the evidence that the ones in here do not include Imra'at al-Aziz. And therefore, when we read قالت امرأة العزيز, she's not there with them. They are talking about her, about what she said. I hope this makes it really clear. This is the key evidence right here. The fact that they're using this word and she did not use this word indicates that she's not there. She was not there with them. So the Quran is making it look like she was there, but she was not. They're talking about what she said to them. Later on in this segment, we're going to see exactly where she said that to them. All right, now we move to ayah number 52. It tells us, ذَلِكَ لِيَعْلَمَ أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي كَيْدَ الْخَائِنِينَ. Notice that we don't know who's saying these words. And this is exactly as I said before. It seems like it's the same discourse, but it's not, because there's a break, there's a new ayah. So immediately Allah is telling us, pay attention, it may not be the same person. And indeed, it is not the same person. Definitely, this is not the women speaking, because it's stated in the singular, meaning I, one person. And it's definitely not Imra'at al-Aziz, because as we saw in the investigation, the women used hasha lillah, and Imra'at al-Aziz does not use that term. Only the gossiping women use this term. So the verb hasha lillah in this ayah specifically is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a marking to tell us who is there and who is speaking. And this is how we knew that they are the ones reporting about Imra'at al-Aziz, what she said. So we go back to ayah 52. ذَلِكَ لِيَعْلَمَ أَنِّي لَمْ أَخُنْهُ بِالْغَيْبِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي كَيْدَ الْخَائِنِينَ. So upon hearing the outcome of the king's investigation, probably from the same ex-prisoner, Yusuf said. So remember, Yusuf sent the messenger, the ex-prisoner, back to the king to request that the king investigates. The king investigated, he got the statement and the testimony of the gossiping women, and the ex-messenger returned to Yusuf to tell him what happened. So Yusuf now is providing a declaration. This is Yusuf speaking. How do we know this? Because of the signature. أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي كَيْدَ الْخَائِنِينَ. This is the signature of the Abrahamic locution type of ayat and statements. And we will talk a lot more about this, inshallah, in a future segment. But basically, this signature in here tells us that the person who's saying this statement in here is someone totally committed to the Abrahamic monotheism. This is clearly not the woman speaking. This is not Imra'at al-Aziz. Definitely not. There was no sign whatsoever throughout the whole surah that she repented or that she tried to stop the conspiracy or anything like that. This is Yusuf speaking. So what is he saying? He's saying that was for him. What I requested him to investigate, which is to investigate the gossiping women, that was for him, for the king, to expose the evidence of the truth, that I never betrayed him in matters that were undisclosed. Lam akhunhu bil ghaib. And here's a huge lesson for us. The definition of the word ghaib, the definition of the word ghaib is given right here. Remember, this has no religious context whatsoever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this word ghaib in the context of a story, and now we understand what ghaib means. Ghaib means undisclosed. So Yusuf was listening to all of these secrets. They were undisclosed. They were not supposed to be disclosed. And yet he was accused of disclosing them. And here the proof came out with the testimony of these gossiping women that he never did anything wrong. And here he's confirming, I never betrayed him in the ghaib. And therefore we understand undisclosed means no one knew this except the owners of this information. So in Ayah 102, when we read ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ, and it is Allah who's declaring the surah as ghaib until it was disclosed. Who is the owner of ghaib? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like here, the owner of ghaib is the king. And Yusuf is saying, I did not disclose ghaib. Over there in Ayah 102, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, that was ghaib until we disclosed it to you. Again, irrefutable evidence that the books of tafsir totally messed up their understanding of these stories and of Ayah 102, as you see right in front of you. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a definition of al-ghaib, something undisclosed, something that has not been made public. No one knew this information except the owners of this information. So Yusuf never betrayed the king in matters that were to remain undisclosed. And then Yusuf continues, وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي كَيْدَ الْخَائِنِينَ, and that I hold myself to the principle that Allah never guides the plotting of the betrayers. And I hope this is really clear. So a very important principle in here about information governance. This is a big word, big technical word. We use it a lot in the consulting practice, etc., etc. But basically it means the expression ghaib indicates that the information belongs to its owner. In the case of Surah Yusuf, it belonged to Allah as He declared it ghaib. Therefore, He knew this was undisclosed. And in this case, it was ghaib that belonged to the king. And Yusuf is saying, I did not disclose it. And it's very clear what's going on. I hope it makes perfect sense. So only its owner may choose to disclose it. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disclosed Surah Yusuf to us in the disclosure of the Quran, Allah disclosed it to our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one knew this before it was disclosed. This is very, very clear. Now we go to ayah number 53. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Yusuf continued, and after this investigation, I am not the one who proclaim my innocence, for indeed the self is liable to incite to harm, except those who are mercifully sustained by my Lord. Surely my Lord is amenable to allow people to reconnect with Him, merciful. So this is the whole ayah. First, we need to identify why it was made as a separate ayah. And the answer is because this is Yusuf talking to himself, not talking to the ex-prisoner. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, Yusuf is confessing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he did something wrong, that he did not declare himself innocent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala found a way for him to be proven innocent, and that was great. But he still recognizes that his nafs did incite to su'. How did his nafs incite to su' or to harm or to something unbecoming, so to speak? The answer is, as we know, Yusuf extended the period of time where he kept pretending to be deaf and mute, and he recognized that was wrong. He was not supposed to extend that period of time. As soon as he grew up and recognized that this was not acceptable, he should have come forward and stated this to the king, but he kept being afraid to say it until all of the conspirators figured out a way to use that fact against him, to compel him, to try to recruit him to become an unwilling spy, so to speak. But he refused, but it was after a long time that he should have disclosed this fact to the king. So he viewed this as inna nafsa la ammaratun bisu. So he recognizes there was something in it for himself, even though he did not really take advantage of it. He did not harm the king. He did not disclose the secret information, still there was something in it for himself. He was enjoying learning about all of these secrets that he was not supposed to hear. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us how sensitive Yusuf is. This is a beautiful spiritual lesson. We need to become so sensitized to every little thing that we're doing, every little sin that we may be committing, even though no one else knows it. We need to admit it to ourselves and remember to try to stop it as soon as possible. Yusuf here is confessing he should have stopped that pretension of being deaf and mute a lot sooner, a lot earlier. And he refers to it by saying, Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu. Indeed, the self is liable to incite to harm. There was no physical harm caused, but it was harm because the king should have had the knowledge that Yusuf was listening in to things that he was not supposed to know about. I hope this is really clear how sensitive Yusuf was being in this ayah. And then he continues, Illa ma rahima rabbi, except those who are mercifully sustained by my Lord. Actually, the ayah does not say Illa man rahima rabbi, those who are mercifully sustained by my Lord. It says ma rahima rabbi, everything, not just everyone, which tells us that Yusuf understands Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides rahmah, sustenance, and mercy, not just to human beings and all of the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the signature again of this ayah tells us clearly that it was Yusuf who was speaking. Surely my Lord is amenable to allow people to reconnect with him, merciful. So as you see, this ayah is the conclusion of this first scene, which came later in the story. So now we understand what exactly happened after the investigation. Now we recognize what's going on, and we go back to ayah number 30 and see the scene with the cutting off of the hands. And now we understand exactly what will happen with these women when we discuss their scene, which is starting in ayah 30. So we go to ayah number 30, and there's a lot more details in here. So again, I hope you keep taking notes and asking questions. But inshallah, we will keep divulging more information and disclosing more evidence as we go. And we will continue with the rest of the surah, and you will see even more and more evidence. Remember, we're building a puzzle. Eventually, you know that you got the solution correctly if you look at the whole puzzle and you see it fitting beautifully. There are no gaps, no extra pieces, there are no unanswered questions. The picture looks correct, everything fits, and then you know you are on the right track. So in ayah number 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ امْرَأَةُ الْعَزِيزِ تُرَاوِدُ فَتَاهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ قَدْ شَغَفَهَا حُبًّا إِنَّا لَنَرَاهَا فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And later, after some time, some women said throughout the city, the reverend one's subordinate woman is attempting to compel her servant young man, Yusuf in this case, to be in an amorous relationship, and they explain, قَدْ شَغَفَهَا حُبًّا, indeed, she is smitten in love with him. And then they continue, إِنَّا لَنَرَاهَا فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, indeed, we see her in manifest aberration. Now, let's position this ayah again. We had the chamber scene, and then there was an investigation, as I explained in part number 23 of this series. And now we have this ayah, ayah 30. So this is a new scene or a new set of events. So the events here start by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrating. Remember, the narrator here is Allah. Remember this. This is really critical because there's a word that's going to be used that tells us everything. So unless we are paying attention to who's speaking, we don't understand if the women are saying the right things or not. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, some women, niswa, some women, qala, this is by the way masculine and niswa is feminine. And right there is a signal from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pay attention, wake up. I'm not just making grammatical errors. I'm waking you up. I'm telling you there's something really critical in this ayah. So some women said throughout the city, في المدينة, امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها عن نفسه. The reverend one's subordinate woman, Imra'at al-Aziz, is attempting to compel her servant young man, referring to Yusuf, to be in an amorous relationship. This is what they're saying, the gossiping women. Pay attention. We're going to see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes their statements as lies. Lies, that means everyone who told us that she was in love with Yusuf have been lying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're going to see this. So the gossiping women are propagating a lie, and we're going to see this in the next ayah. Allah refers to their words as makr. Makr means treachery, lies, deception. Allah refers to them as treacherous, deceptive, lying. So here this ayah is telling us that they're saying about that woman and Yusuf that they're in love with each other. And at the end of this ayah, ayah 30, they're making fun of the woman, saying she is really confused. She is in manifest aberration. Why? Because Yusuf is not even capable of giving that type of love. And you know what I mean. He is from ghayabat al-jub, as we explained it before. So they're laughing and mocking Imra'at al-Aziz. And we're going to see why they're doing this. They're doing this for a very, very important strategic reason. And we're going to see who got them to say this in the first place. So don't read this as some innocent event that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. No, this is pushing the plot further and further so that we understand more about the real story of Yusuf. So a group of women were gossiping, spreading rumors, so to speak. This is how we should understand it, about Imra'at al-Aziz. And we're going to see why in just a few minutes. They're saying she is in love with this servant young man. And they're making fun of her, and they're laughing at her, and they're mocking her, saying she is so confused. She is in manifest aberration. She's really crazy because such a man does not have a way to give her back what she's looking for. I hope you understand what I mean. So now we need to address a couple of issues. In note number 1, I want you to notice the word fil Medina. Fil Medina, using the locative preposition fi, in al-Medina, in this city or in this place of established order, as we will see. Whereas in ayah 12:21, where the ayah says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرٍ, the one who bought him who was from Misr. He did not buy him in Misr. So in Misr, in here, would have been fi Misr. But the ayah says min Misr. He is from Misr, but he did not buy him in Misr. I hope this is clear. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is training us. When he wants to say fil Medina, he could say fil Medina. He could have said fi Misr in here. I hope this makes sense. But there's more in here. So here the ayah says, وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. The impression we get is that there's a group of women who are spreading these rumors actively, aggressively, excessively throughout the city. I hope this makes sense. This is exactly what this ayah is telling us. And they're talking about Imra'at al-Aziz turawidu fataha an nafsihi, etc., etc. In the next ayah, we're going to analyze it in a lot more detail, and we're going to see why they were spreading such rumors. So we go to the next ayah, ayah 31. فَلَمَّا سَمِعَتْ بِمَكْرِهِنَّ أَرْسَلَتْ إِلَيْهِنَّ وَأَعْتَدَتْ لَهُنَّ مُتَّكَأً وَآتَتْ كُلَّ وَاحِدَةٍ مِّنْهُنَّ سِكِّينًا وَقَالَتْ اخْرُجْ عَلَيْهِنَّ فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَهُ وَقَطَّعْنَ أَيْدِيَهُنَّ وَقُلْنَا حَاشَ لِلَّهِ مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا مَلَكٌ كَرِيمٌ. Because we understood what happened in ayah 50 and 51, now we can understand this ayah much better. And this is what I said. We had a cluster of these puzzle pieces that we were able to put together in ayah 50 through 53. Now we come back to this cluster, ayah 30 through 32, and we're going to put them together, and you're going to see they fit beautifully. So what's going on in here? Let me give you the translation, and then we will dive into one sentence at a time. And this is going to take us a few minutes, so be patient and pay attention. So the translation goes like this. And so, when news about the gossiping women's deception reached her, meaning Imra'at al-Aziz, the reverent one's subordinate woman, she sent a message or a messenger to them and readied for them an exonerating legal defense, i.e. a legal punishment evasion strategy, a strategy to evade legal punishment. That tells us that she knew some legal issues and she was fully aware of how to protect these women. We're going to see why. This is very critical to understand. And she provided a knife to each of them to stab Yusuf, as you will see. After that, she said to Yusuf, go preach to them, go against them, to denounce their rumors. And he did. And when the gossiping women saw his point of view, فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَهُ. We talked about this before. أَكْبَرْنَهُ, they considered his opinion valid or respectable. So when they saw his point of view, saw with their opinion, remember, not saw physically, رَأَيْنَهُ. The hamza in here is on the alif, not on the line. So that tells us it's about opinion. So when they saw his opinion, that means they understood his opinion or point of view or recognized it or accepted it. They valued it, they honored it, they dignified it, they considered it valid. So they respected him, أكبرنه, and considered his opinion valid. And they severed their support for the conspirators. قطعنا أيديهن. They severed, not their hands, but the hands they were offering to support the conspirators. In other words, they stopped supporting the conspirators. And this is really critical to understand because the word yad is used throughout the Quran in the same meaning. So any kind of support you provide to others is referred to as yad. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to his own yad, he's talking about the support he provides. Astaghfirullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be described to have a physical hand. Of course not. And we should not even think that way. So the word yad is clearly explained in here. And we're going to see why they severed their support for the conspirators. So to sever their support for the conspirators after they valued the opinion of Yusuf right here is described as قَطَّعْنَا أَيْدِيَهُنْ. They severed their hands. They severed the way they used to support the conspirators, or they severed their ability to support the conspirators. And then they said, strategizing about what to say, etc., etc. We'll come back to this. He took the side of Allah. He took the side of Allah. Hasha lillah, as I showed you before. Hasha lillah. He went to the margin. He sidestepped our request to him, or our attempt. Our attempt to do what? We're going to see. This was not the feat of a human. This was but an angel with miraculous feats. We're going to provide a lot more specifics. So be patient and stay with me, inshallah. First, let's go to the beginning. When she got the news about the gossiping women's deception, meaning the news or the gossip itself circulated enough throughout the city and returned back to her, reached her. Why do I say this? Because you will see she is the one who initiated that gossip, who initiated that rumor campaign. Why? Think about this. She already attempted to kill him. And therefore, there was another assassination plot being cooked against Yusuf. A plot was being prepared, including these gossiping women, so-called gossiping women. They're not really just gossiping women. She sent them knives. She sent them knives. Think about this. That means she knew exactly how many there are. The Quran says, آتت كل واحدة منهن سكينا. Every single one of them received a knife. That means this woman, Imra'at al-Aziz, knew exactly how many of them. Not only that, but she knew exactly where they were. She gave them these knives. So I hope you appreciate how precise the Quran is. If we just give it a chance to tell us the truth. The truth is, she gave them knives. What do you think they're going to do with these knives? We're going to see. So here we have to understand also that the Quran calls their rumors makr, deception or treachery. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly telling us what they said in ayah number 30, the ayah before this one, were treacherous lies. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't subscribe to what they said. These women were telling lies, purposeful deceit. What did our books of tafsir say? They fell in line with what these gossiping women said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing what these women said as makr, treachery and deceit and lies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear about this. This is the narrator speaking, not my voice, not Yusuf speaking, not one of the protagonists. Allah as a narrator is telling us their lies, their deceit. What did the books of tafsir do? They swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker, as we say. They said exactly what these women said is correct. So how do we describe what the books of tafsir said after we see Allah is describing the words of these gossiping women as treachery, as deceit? We call it, in the language of the Quran, belying the Quran, belying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is telling us what they said are lies. The books of tafsir, all of them, every single one of them, said these women said the truth. Imra'at al-Aziz was in love with Yusuf. I hope you appreciate how significant one word is to change everything we know, not only about the story, but as you will see in the closing remarks, everything in the Quran changes if we understand this single word right here. Allah is referring to them as spreading rumors and lies and deceitful, treacherous tales, and therefore we have to believe Allah. We don't believe the books of tafsir. I told you this story is an event. It changes everything. It changes everything in how you look at the Quran, and I hope you are agreeing with me by now. If your blood is boiling, it should be. So let's continue. When she heard of their treachery, of their deception, meaning those rumors reached her, she sent a messenger or a message to them. Why do I say she sent a messenger or a message to them? Do you know what the books of tafsir told us about this part right here in blue? The books of tafsir told us she sent them an invitation. Where in the world do you read an invitation in here? أرسلت إليهن, she sent to them. That's all it says. She sent to them. Sent, or the verb أرسل or rasul, means a message or a messenger from her to them. That means she was communicating with them. That's all it means. They changed this obvious word and included a batini tafsir. They're the ones who are doing the batini tafsir and saying there was an invitation in here. There is no invitation in the text as you see it. In blue right here, there's no invitation. So she sent to them a message. أرسلت إليهن. Now if you don't believe me, go back and see the rest of the verb أرسل, and every single time it's used in this surah or in the rest of the Quran, I dare you to come up with one single instance that says أرسل means to invite. It does not mean to invite. It means send a message or a messenger. And here you can look at all of the ayat in this surah. You can do a simple search throughout the Quran and find out for yourself. Is there any instance where أرسلت إليهن or أرسل إليه means to invite him? This is not part of the Quranic lexicon. This is part of the 7th century poets' lexicon. This is not part of the Quranic lexicon. But they imposed their own opinion on these words. They created a batini tafsir, a batil tafsir, an erroneous tafsir based on their own judgment, not based on what the Quran is telling us. So we go back to the ayah. أرسلت إليهن, she sent a message to them. What was the message? The message is أعتدت لهن متكئا. We're going to see what this means. I'm going to come back to this in just a few seconds. وآتت كل واحدة منهن سكينا. She provided a knife to every single one of them. That means she knew their location, and that means she knew their count, and that means she was preparing them to use that knife. What was she ordering them to use the knife for? The obvious answer, to do the same thing she failed to do with Yusuf, which is to kill him or to assassinate him. And I told you, this is why we believe, we understand that the scene in Ayah 23, which is the famous chamber scene, where she slit his shirt from behind. Slit means to cause a sharp slice in his shirt that was done with a sharp instrument, that was a knife. In here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us she sent them knives. Now, before I go into وَقَالَتِ اخْرُجْ عَلَيْهِنَّ, let's go back to وَأَعْتَدَتْ لَهُنَّ مُتَّكَأً. She readied for them or prepared for them an exonerating legal defense, legal punishment evasion strategy. What is that? Do you remember when we saw in the second trip of the brothers to Misr, earlier in this series but later in the surah, when we saw the brothers were asking مَا جَزَاؤُهُ إِن كُنتُمْ كَاذِبِينَ قالوا جزاؤه من وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه. The brothers were asking, what happens to us if you are not truthful. In other words, if we are discovered that we are the ones who spread the rumor, or we are all thieves or something like that, is there a collective punishment? The answer was very specific. The answer from the authorities was, whoever we find the missing item with the evidence, the stolen item, with him, he is the one who is punished. In other words, there's no collective punishment. You cannot punish a whole group because you don't know the single individual who committed the crime. You need to identify the single individual who committed the crime and punish only that individual. Now we understand. She was preparing for them a legal strategy. If a whole group of people collectively kill one man, that man is killed by an unknown person because there's no evidence against a single individual. The whole group cannot be punished collectively according to the laws of the king. I hope you understand what I just said. This is a significant legal principle. It's actually used in all modern legal codes. You have to identify the specific criminal in order to punish him. You cannot punish the many on behalf of a crime committed by a single individual. The Quran is giving us that principle. This woman, Imra'at al-Aziz, is using this knowledge about the law of the king, the established order of the king, Deen al-Malik, and she is taking advantage of it. So she's telling these women, if all of you, a large number of you, we don't know how many of them there were, a large number of you collectively kill Yusuf all at once, not a single person can be identified who is the actual culprit, who is the actual criminal. And that's muttaka right here. That is the exonerating legal defense. In other words, whoever investigates this crime, even if it is reported that this specific group of women are actually the ones who participated in the assassination, because not a single woman is identified to actually have committed the crime, the law does not allow for the punishment of all of them simultaneously or together. So this is a legal defense. So she prepared for them a legal defense, an exonerating legal argument that they could use, that I didn't do it, another woman did it, or another part of the group did it. I wasn't even close to Yusuf at that time. As they say in Arabic, Yusuf's blood is spread throughout a large number of people. As a matter of fact, in the books of Sirah, this exact example is used when they told us that the people of Quraysh prepared to collectively kill our beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam right before his departure to Yathrib. And therefore they used the exact same concept. So the authors of the books of tafsir should have understood this concept very clearly. Instead, they told us that she invited them to some sort of banquet or some sort of a big feast, and to parade Yusuf and his beauty and his handsomeness in front of them, to tease them. Again, they turned this story into a Disney story, a childish cartoon story, instead of truly understanding the depth of this story. So she prepared for them a legal defense against legal punishment. So in order for them to evade the legal punishment for the crime she instructed them to do, which she sent them, every single one of them, a knife, she gave them this command: all of you kill him at the same time. It is absolutely obvious and very clear. The words cannot lead us to any other conclusion. So therefore, she heard of the rumors that they spread. That rumor was spread widely enough to where it returned to her. That means she was satisfied that rumor was spread sufficiently. She sent the command, it is time to act. She gave them that legal defense, and she sent a single knife to every single one of these women, multiple women. So now we're left with one specific question. Why did they spread this rumor in the first place? And the answer should be very obvious by now. She tried to assassinate him in the palace, and I told you there was a justifiable reason why the king got involved, because it was a serious accusation. Somebody tried to attack somebody else, and it turned out that Yusuf was innocent. Very clear. But now she became the prime suspect if Yusuf turned out dead. So therefore, in order to push away any suspicion from her, she deliberately spread the wrong rumor that she's in love with him. So in order to get the suspicion away from her for the impending assassination attempt against Yusuf, she started by spreading the rumor, a disinformation campaign. Are you listening? This is the amazing sophistication of this story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us all of this training. Pay attention to all of these tricks and games that the enemies play, that the dishonest people, the violators of trust play these games. So you Muslims who understand these stories should be alert to these things. Don't fall for these tricks. And yet we were deprived of all of this information. As Muslims, we were trained to accept this story as a child story, as a tale, fairy tale, instead of understanding the depth of this story. Now, was she done? No. Part of the plot, part of the plan, is to send Yusuf to them. So she told him, اخرج عليهن, go out against them. Remember in the story of Zakaria, فخرج على قومه, he came out against his community, against his people. Here, she told Yusuf, اخرج عليهن, go out against them, meaning go quell these rumors, go talk to these women, tell them to stop their gossip, because obviously what they're saying is wrong. So she herself, between her and Yusuf, they know the truth, and she's telling Yusuf, go and denounce these rumors, go do what you do, preach to them, convince them to stop it. And this is the treachery and the plotting and the scheming of this devious woman. So Yusuf could not say no, obviously, because as we saw before, she held something over him. So he was obligated to obey her. So indeed, he went out there. He went to a location that she told him. He did not know these gossiping women. She did. She sent him to them. So these gossiping women did not come to the palace to have a feast. These gossiping women were part of the conspirators, or at least providing a hand, a helpful support to the conspirators by spreading these rumors, and they were supposed to assassinate Yusuf. So when Yusuf got there, he expressed his point of view, and they liked his point of view much better. These women had some sort of conscience left in them. So they accepted Yusuf's opinion, and they valued it, and they dignified his opinion, and decided to cease their support for the conspirators. Is it a far-fetched explanation for a great prophet like Yusuf to be able to convince such women? Absolutely not. This is very easy. This is the job of a prophet. This is the role of a prophet. And he was very capable. Yusuf was trained by the best. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us something very sensible, something that makes perfect sense. And Yusuf was able to convince them. So they decided to cease their support for the conspiracy. Now, I want you to understand what position they put themselves in. They understood that because Yusuf would not support the conspirators were ready to kill him. Therefore, if these women stopped supporting the conspirators, what do you think other conspirators would do to these women? Of course, they would assassinate them or get rid of them or punish them somehow. And therefore, now they started thinking, we need to ready our strategy in defense against the conspirators. We're not going to support the conspiracy anymore, but what are we going to do? So they developed a strategy, and the strategy is to explain what happened when they met Yusuf and they could not kill him. They could not assassinate him. So the explanation they came up with is, Hasha lillah, he sidestepped toward Allah. He ran away. He escaped miraculously. And this was not the feat of a human being. Ma hadha basharan. Those of you who know Arabic, you understand that the word basharan should have been basharun if it's describing Yusuf. But because it's a hal, an adverb type of explanation, it is describing the feat of Yusuf. It's describing his miraculous escape. Remember, they're inventing a strategy to explain why they failed at the assassination attempt, and in their own mind, they're not going to support the conspirators anymore. But first, they have to explain why they failed. And their explanation is, this guy acted in a miraculous way, not in a way that any other human being can do. So they're describing his state of affairs, or what he did. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it using basharan, not basharun. So this is not a grammatical error. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing our attention that these women are describing what Yusuf did, not describing Yusuf himself. And then they continue, in hadha illa malakun kareem. This was but an angel with miraculous feats. So now they're using a local locution to refer to Malak. Did they understand about angels? Absolutely they did, because in that same location, Ibrahim resided in the past and Nuh resided in the past. So there is very strong reason to believe that this locution was part of what people used in that location in Misr. So this is not a far-fetched explanation. So the point here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the women ceased their support for the conspirators. And in order to help themselves not become the target of the conspirators, they had to come up with a way to explain their failure to assassinate Yusuf. In the next ayah, we're going to see a dialogue between these gossiping women and Imra'at al-Aziz, the reverend one's subordinate woman. So this is what we call a debriefing meeting, sort of a meeting after the fact. So because this is such an important ayah in this scene and for the whole story of Yusuf, let's review some summary notes. So in the notes, we look at number 1. The term makrihinna is stated by Allah, the narrator. This is irrefutable evidence that what the gossiping women said is nothing but treacherous, deceitful lies. There was no love story whatsoever. These women were just making up a lie. And by the way, those of you who understand public relations and media, it is very salacious, it's very attractive, it's very popular to talk about a love affair between a woman and her servant young man, who, by the way, is from Ghayabat al-Jub. He cannot even do these things. So it's kind of laughable and funny and mocking and all of that stuff. So it's very, very amenable to be spread. It is an easy rumor to spread. And she didn't care about her reputation. There was a much higher goal she was after. First, she was after getting rid of Yusuf. Second, they were persisting in the conspiracy against the king. That was the most important thing. The second note, فَلَمَّا سَمِعَتْ بِمَكْرِهِنَّ, indicates that the rumor reached her after it circulated sufficiently and widely enough. Third, the intent of the rumor was to distance the woman from the impending assassination against Yusuf. Which assassination? The one she was plotting herself with the help of these gossiping women. Third, the expression أرسلت إليهن does not indicate she sent them an invitation, as I said in here, and you can review many ayat that use this exact same verb. The expression أرسلت إليهن clearly indicates that she knew their location and she knew how many of them. أعتدت لهن متكئا, this expression indicates that she readied for them a legal defense strategy to exonerate them as the investigation would be carried out in the future and they would not suffer any legal prosecution. It has nothing to do with getting them seating arrangements, etc., as if she invited them to a feast. Number 7, the expression آتت كل واحدة منهن سكينا clearly indicates that she knew their exact count and she was sending them a knife. And notice the word sikin is a generic description of a knife, not a dagger such as midya or khanjar in Arabic, another word that the Quran could have used. No, just a basic sikin, a nondescript, generic knife, just a knife to achieve the mission, which is to kill Yusuf. And then finally, the expression اخرج عليهن indicates that she instructed Yusuf to go out against what they said and what they believed, to denounce what they said and what they believed. All right, so now we go to ayah number 32. قالت فذلكن الذي لمتنني فيه ولقد راودته عن نفسه فاستعصم ولئن لم يفعل ما آمره ليسجنن ولا يكونن من الصاغرين. This expression is by her. قالت, Imra'at al-Aziz is speaking. So the reverend one's subordinate woman said to the gossiping women as she met with them later. As I said, this is a debriefing meeting. This is a meeting after their failure, and they are discussing between them and her what happened. So we saw that what they said is, ما هذا بشرا, this is not the feat of a human being. He sidestepped to Allah. حاشا لله. So therefore he was mumbling something about Allah. This is the intention behind their expression. He sidestepped toward Allah and ran away, escaped miraculously. And this was not the work of a human being. This was the work of a noble angel. So now that's her reply in this ayah. She said, that, meaning you're failing to kill him, is exactly the same as what you chided me about. ذَلِكُنَّ الَّذِي لُمْتُنَّنِي فِيهِ. How do we know she's talking to them? Because ذَلِكُنَّ is clearly addressing a number of women. And this is the only number of women that the story is talking about, the gossiping women. So therefore she's meeting with them, as I said, for a debriefing meeting. She's talking to them as a result of their failure. So this is what you blamed me about. This is what you chided me about, which means that they had met before and they had discussed the issue before and they developed the strategy before. So therefore, when they initially developed the strategy was first, spread the rumor. And when I hear of the rumor getting back to me in the palace, that means the rumor was spread wide enough. And that's part 2 of the strategy, of the plan, which is I send you the instructions and I send you the legal defense, that how you explain yourself in case of an investigation, and I will send you each her own knife, and I will send Yusuf to you. Therefore, when he gets to you, you do your deed. You kill him, you assassinate him collectively. And this was part 2 of the plan. So we saw all of this in ayah number 31. So now in ayah number 32, they're debriefing, they're discussing what went wrong, sort of mission debrief, as some people use in military lingo, so to speak. So that's what you chided me about. That's what you blamed me for failing to do. And I had indeed attempted to compel him to cooperate. He's telling them, I did try to compel him to reveal to me the king's secrets, to recruit him to become part of the conspiracy. But when he refused and then I attempted to kill him, he succeeded in protecting himself physically and legally and from committing any errors. He did not make any mistakes. Therefore, this is a confession that A, he physically escaped her attempt, B, he legally escaped disclosing the fact that he's able to speak and to hear, which tells us that these gossiping women knew that Yusuf was able to speak and to hear. So therefore, Yusuf was compelled to go to them and talk to them, and he had no choice, because what she held over his head, what she held him by the neck with, is the fact that he was deceiving the king himself. And she was pushing him to either fall into that trap, into this error, or to physically assassinate him. And then she continues, وَلَئِن لَمْ يَفْعَلْ مَا أَمُرُهُ. And if in the future he does not act according to the plan that I command him to follow, يَفْعَل, remember, يَفْعَل indicates a plan. There's planning going on, as we saw several times already in this surah. If he does not act according to the plan I command him to follow, he shall certainly be imprisoned. لَيُسْجَنَنَّ وَلَيَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. And this is a really interesting expression. وَلَيَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. And he shall certainly become one of the defeated. What do I mean, defeated? The word صَاغِرِينَ, specifically, every word that comes from this root, صَغَرَ or صَغَار or صَاغِرِينَ, all of these words are used throughout the Quran, and it's always referring to the enemy, specifically in a military type of conflict. So whenever there is a military contention or conflict or battle, the losers are described as صاغرين. So here we get the clear hint that they're planning something major against the king. And this will become extremely important to understand the report that the king will give us later, as we see at the time when Yusuf comes out from prison. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here the word صاغرين, suffice it to say that when the Quran uses it, it refers to a significant conflict with the enemy. So this tells us that this woman, Imra'at al-Aziz, considered the losers in the impending coup, so to speak. The losers of that battle shall be described as صاغرين. So Yusuf had a choice. Either he will do what I command him to do according to the plan, or he will go to jail. And after he goes to jail, he shall be among the losers in that impending battle. This is very clear language, and this gave us the clear hint, the clear indication that the conspirators were planning something major against the king. There was a significant battle or significant fight or significant contest about to come in the near future. So let's look at some notes before we close with the closing remarks. Notice that the woman confessed that she attempted to compel him, but she failed. I told you, she confessed to these gossiping women. And when the gossiping women cut off their hand, meaning withdrew their support, later on when the king investigated the gossiping women, Guess what the gossiping women told the king? She confessed to us that she tried to compel him. And therefore, that was the context that gave us the explanation of the ayat 50, 51, and 52, and 53, as you saw. And that's why I gave you these ayat at the beginning of the segment, and now we understand how we see the truth in this part of the story. So I told you, the evidence always comes later. But in this segment, I'm giving you a taste that you look ahead in order to understand what came before. And this is what we're doing in here. Additionally, the expression وَلَا يَكُونَنْ, those of you who know Arabic know that this is broken Arabic. Right here. وَلَا يَكُونَنْ مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. This is not proper Arabic. A 7th century Arab poet would never be caught dead using this kind of language. The right language is وَلَا يَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ, just like لَا يُسْجَنَنَّ وَلَا يَكُونَنَّ. No, that's not what the Quran says. وَلَا يَكُونَنَّ. Why? There are two reasons. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing that there's something significant being said by this woman. So pay attention and learn the true story. Number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this woman was not from the Hyksos. She did not speak their language correctly. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala converted her broken Hyksos speech into this broken Arabic in order to give us the clear indication that she's a foreigner to the Hyksos. She's an enemy to them. She's an outsider to them, so to speak. And we have seen the same style used earlier before. Haytalak, the same concept. And I explained this before when we talked about ayah number 23 of this surah. And then finally, the whole ayah is what the gossiping women testified about in front of the king in ayah 51 when the king carried out the investigation with these gossiping women. I hope it makes perfect sense now. These two segments of the puzzle, these two subsets of the puzzle came together. So now we have a bigger subset of the whole story, and we see exactly what's going on with the event, with the gossiping women, and with the investigation that led to Yusuf coming out of jail. And finally, I need to ask you, why did Yusuf refuse to come out of jail the first time? And he asked the king to investigate the gossiping women before coming out. You need to think about this. Write me on the comment stream. I want you to write on the comment stream with your opinion. If you understand why Yusuf refused to come out of jail the first time and he insisted that the king carries out the investigation. Please think about this hard. You have 2 days. We're not going to issue a new segment tomorrow, inshallah, because this segment is longer than usual. I need you to think and reflect. And if you are too shy to write on the comment stream, write me on the email. But I really prefer that we have this conversation on the comment stream. Those of you who are subscribed to the website, please feel free to do so as a post on the community forum. But really, I need everyone watching to contribute to the comments in order to help YouTube algorithm spread these lectures and these presentations. We really need as many people as possible to become familiar with how significantly different the Quranic story of Yusuf is from the traditional story that we were told in the books of tafsir. And with this, we come to the closing remarks, which are really, really important. So as I said, please contribute with comments and questions on the comment stream. So with these closing remarks, I'm going to take you in a totally different direction and give you some methodological instructions. Remember, the purpose of the channel from the first day is to teach methodology, to encourage people to engage the Quran using the proper methodology. Why? So that we ready ourselves to receive the divine guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The understanding comes from Allah, not from the methodology. But you need to apply the methodology to yourself. And here I'm going to share with you a specific example to teach you how significant the story of Yusuf is to understanding the rest of the Quran, and why the people who did not understand the story of Yusuf failed miserably at understanding the rest of the Quran. And I'm going to use one word. We saw it in ayah 51, and you're going to see for yourself the ripple effect of understanding one story correctly and how it affects so many other things in the Quran. The expression is ma khatbukunna. Remember, in ayah 51, the king is investigating and interrogating the gossiping women. So the king says, ما خطبكن إذ راوتن يوسف عن نفسه. What caused you to behave how you behaved? And this is an Abrahamic locution expression that is used in many different places. And I give you all of the ayat where it's used. And it's consistently a confrontational type of question. It's not an endearing question. It is not an easy question. It's a question of someone who's aggressively asking the person in front of him, as the king is doing, interrogating the gossiping women. So he is aggressively interrogating them. What was wrong with you? What caused you to behave this way? This is clearly not a friendly question. This is not an easy conversation he was having with them. This was a tough discussion. So therefore, this is an accusatory question. He is accusing them of doing something wrong. And now we understand how significant this expression is. This expression is also used in Ayah 28:23, the famous scene where Musa arrives by the water of Madian. You remember, Musa escaped from Misr after that crime that he was involved in, and he ran away from Misr toward Madian, and when he arrived at the waters of Madian, he found these two women. We were told in the books of traditional tafsir that he was very friendly to these women, trying to help them, trying to support their cause against the other shepherds who were depriving them of having access to water for their flocks, etc., etc. And you read some amazing, silly explanations. If you understand this expression right here, ما خطبكن, an accusatory, confrontational, aggressive, interrogating type of question, Musa used the exact same expression with these two women. So Musa was challenging them, these two women. He was not inquiring how to help them. He was not being endearing to them. He was not supportive. He was not helpful. He was not friendly to them. He was confrontational to them. That means they were doing something he did not like. That means the whole story they told us about what happened between Musa and these two women is bogus, makes absolutely no sense according to the Quran. And you see with one expression how we invalidate hundreds of pages that were written in books of tafsir about that scene between Musa and these two women by the water of Madian. So therefore, Musa did not like what these two women were doing, and he was aggressive with them. He was antagonistic toward them. It is not what they told us in the books of tafsir. These two women were not weaklings who were waiting patiently and scared for other shepherds to allow them to have access to the water for their flocks. No, they did something that Musa did not like, and Musa came out aggressively. Ma khatbukuma. This is what the ayah 28:23 says in Surah Al-Qasas. And those of you who are willing to do some investigation, you can easily read about this. Now, what does it say? That tells us that Surah Yussuf unlocks so many other stories in the Quran. So in a sense, Surah Yussuf is your training wheels, teaching you how to unlock dozens of other segments and paragraphs and stories in the Quran. Why do I call it training wheels? Because Surah Yussuf assembles most of its evidence in one location, in one surah. And this is an easy way to decode that one surah because everything is relatively combined in about 13 pages, 111 ayat. But in all the other stories, such as story of Musa, story of Ibrahim, story of Zakaria, as we saw, the story is spread across the whole Quran, at the least in about half a dozen or 12 different surahs. In the case of the story of Musa, over 35 surahs. So really you have to gather all of the pieces of evidence. So if we go back to the example of assembling this big 1,000 piece puzzle, the Quran is giving us multiple puzzles, and different pieces of every single puzzle is spread throughout the Quran. So the task of assembling the right pieces for the right puzzle is the first challenge. The second challenge is to try to put every single puzzle by itself. In the case of Surah Yussuf, it is one puzzle, all the pieces in about 13 pages, 111 ayah. So it's relatively easy. It is the training wheels for us, and yet they failed miserably. Provably, they failed at understanding even the basic vocabulary of Surah Yussuf. Why? Because they derailed themselves with all of the biases that we've been talking about. And such is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you start approaching the Quran by belying the ayat of Allah, Allah will take His revenge upon you, and you will not get to see not a single ayah, not a single piece of evidence they were able to see, as I've been proving again and again in the past 24 segments in this series. I hope you're taking this to heart. I hope you're feeling this passion and this power of what we're doing in here on this channel. This is not a joke. This is not just opinions that we're throwing out and some empty explanations. We're showing you right in front of you how significant the story of Yusuf is. And finally, we need to go back to ayah number 7. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي يُوسُفَ وَإِخْوَتِهِ آيَاتٌ لِلسَّائِلِينَ. We have seen this before. There has been in Yusuf and his siblings, and we said in the story of Yusuf and his siblings, clear signs to those who inquire, ask questions persistently. Remember, we said sa'ilin is an active participle form of the verb. It's not to those who ask, not liman yas'al, those who ask. No, lis-sa'ilin, persistently, keep asking. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us, in order for you to be among those who see the signs, you have to have a nature, you have to have an attitude of always asking smart questions, probing questions, daring questions to try to learn, because that's your right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you a preference. If you are among those sa'ilin, those who persistently ask questions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you the signs. Where? In the story of Yusuf and his brothers? No. In the stories of Yusuf and all his brothers among the prophets and messengers and the good people described in the Quran. I hope this has opened your horizon beyond this surah. And this is why I've been telling you, this surah is the key that unlocks everything in the Quran. Those who don't even understand Surah Yusuf have no leg to stand on to claim they understand anything in the Quran, as I've proven and demonstrated again and again. I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the wisdom to understand this surah and to understand all the bayinat and the evidence from it, and give us the humility and the appreciation to receive Allah's mercy and Allah's guidance and to remain on the right path, inshaAllah. And with this, we come to the closing of this segment. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah laqad ja'at rusulu rabbina bil haqq. Thank you so much for watching. Assalamu alaikum.